All right, hi everyone. Today we have an awesome guest. Her name is Cloris, and she is the brains behind. Uh, she's got a podcast. She's got a book about beyond influencer marketing. So we're going to learn a little bit more about her brand and what it's about. She interacts with a lot of influencers, and she's an influencer herself. She's not someone that has millions of followers, but she does have a brand, and she interacts with a lot of influencers. So I think her story is really unique, and she has a lot of value to share with us today. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show today, Clarice.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. It's awesome to be here.
Awesome. So can you just give us a quick spiel about what your brand is all about before we jump into things?
Yeah, sure. Everything I do is driven by long-term business connections, and specifically connections with influencers. And the reason is that I was at a point in my business when I thought I just had to quit because I wasn't really seeing that impact. I had my platforms, yes, I had a blog, a radio show, and I felt like I was creating all this great content and nobody cared. And it was so frustrating that I just said, this is not worth it, so much work for no reason. And it was only when I started to connect with influencers who introduced me to their audiences that things changed for me. So that's why I wrote Beyond Influencer Marketing. And when I say the word beyond, it means to go beyond the transaction, just like, oh, go ahead and promote my stuff or whatever, or do a shout out. It's about creating a relationship. So that's why the podcast name is also Beyond Influencer Marketing. Just always thinking about that connection, that long term relationship.
Right, that's great. So can you tell me about maybe a story that comes to mind for someone that you've impacted unexpectedly through your brand, through either your podcast or your book?
Yeah, it's interesting how you create content and you don't know, who's reading it, who's consuming it, and the changes that they're experiencing in their life because of it. I get a lot of people who reply to my emails that I send on a weekly basis and say, "Oh, this just got to me exactly at the time that I needed it. I was looking for this." So you never know, and one of those things happened very early in my business when I maybe had a couple of connections with influencers, but I had just published a book, and it was a personal development book. At the time, that was my calling, right? I wanted to empower, particularly women who had gone through a big transition to really reveal their magnificence, right?
Hmm.
So again, the book was written for women. I put it out there, and then all of a sudden, I get was such an email, and it was a man. He said, "I am a reader. I read your book." And I am in where you live in Connecticut. I'm in the area. I was wondering if we could meet in person. So I said, "Oh, what the heck? It'd be nice to meet somebody who read my book." So we met at the Barnes and Noble, and he said, "I just wanted to tell you that your book changed my life. When I read it, I was in a really dark place. After reading it, I said I have to take care of myself." And he said he lost 80 pounds. And when we met, he was actually ready to move down to Florida and start a new life. And I said, "Oh, okay, this is amazing." I never thought a guy who, would read the book and have it be such a great influence, for him. So that's one of the most memorable experiences I have. So bottom
Wow.
line, you never know who's reading your stuff, who's consuming your content, and the impact you're creating. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you wrote that book, it's not like you had in mind that somebody would you read it and then apply it to losing 80 pounds and
Right.
changing his life, moving out of state and stuff like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's awesome. So let's dive into or figure out where your sharing journey started, because you talked about your current brand, but now you've got this previous book about self development that you had. So like, where did you start sharing yourself on a larger level and with the world?
Yeah, well, I used to have a business doing what I call academic coaching. So I had a team of people helping me coach students, high school and college students, to basically move on to the next step in their career. So it would be to go to the college of their dreams or to go to grad school. So we help them transition to that. And then I went through a tough time in my life. My marriage ended, and I thought it was the end of the world. So, I started to write about my experience, as a way. It was a cathartic thing, I was just kind of releasing what I was feeling. And then also at the time I had been reading a lot of books by Dr. Wayne Dyer, who later became actually a mentor. It's amazing how life works. So I was reading all these books and I said, I can oh, it looks like my video is not on anymore, but okay, it's back on. uh, so at the so I said, what if I apply all these concepts I'm learning from all these books I'm consuming on how to overcome this, and create my own book, to help people going through something like this. So that's when I wrote this book, and that was the first time that I shared more of who I was. My other business was more like, okay, well, let me help you get to that Ivy League school and let's do this and that. But now for the first time I had to share personal stuff and my own stories. So that was the first time. Yeah.
So when you released your book, you have a blog? Did you have any platforms? Were you sharing on social media, or was the book like just the entry into that world?
That was actually the entry into that world, because at the time I had no clue how to promote a book or how to do anything really online. I just wrote the book, and then I had this company who said, "Oh, we can help you with the marketing." I trusted them. I said, "Okay, go ahead. You know what you're doing." Going back or looking back, I regret that decision, but at the time I didn't know better. But yes, that's how I started. And then, based on the content of the book, I started a blog and a radio show. It was a live radio show. So that's how I started to get my message out even more. Yeah.
Okay, so you released the book, then you needed to promote the book, so then you started a blog, you started a radio show, and then some point during that journey is you got into the beyond influencer marketing. Is that the next
Yeah.
step?
Well, when I started that, again, I thought, oh, I'm going to have this radio show and this blog is going to be amazing, right? Everybody's going to. But no, again, it was like crickets. Like, oh, okay. So I wrote this book. I'm writing all these, blog posts and creating all these episodes in social media. And I'm working my butt off because I also had my other business. So I had to run the two things at the same time. And I was getting burned out. But at the same time, I had made a switch in my radio show. So instead of it being like solo episodes, I was actually bringing in guests who had, they were influencers. So the more I worked with them, the more I became inspired. Like, oh wow, this is, these people really wanted to help me after they had been on the show, and I wanted to help them because I was learning a lot about digital marketing and just wanting to help them by giving them tips and things I had learned. So we started to create that connection, and that's when I started to see a shift. They were sharing my radio show and my articles, and I started to post articles on large websites such as Tiny Buddha. So I had all these readers. I saw my list of subscribers grow, and finally, it's like, oh, finally, I have an audience, because I started to connect with the influencers and also to share my message on other people's platforms. So I hadn't thought about that before. So that's what changed everything, and that's when I decided to make the shift and just really teach people how they can do that.
Okay, and so the radio show, did that evolve into now being part of the new brand, or did you start a new one? Like,
I
what happened
started a
there?
new one. Yeah, I started a new one. So that's the Beyond Influencer Marketing show. I wanted to make it so the message was just about that, just really focused. So yeah, I made that shift to a new show too.
Okay. So for you, I guess it's been a journey to find what you're both passionate about and also what people are gonna consume more readily. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say so. Yeah, you definitely have to check with your audience by actually, interviewing them or doing whatever you can to have that one-on-one interaction and know where they're at, right? So you can reach them that best way possible. And also, when you connect with the influencers, you have to ask yourself, do they have the same values and style that I have? Because if I connect with someone, let's say that our styles are completely different, Jeremy, and your audience uh, like listens to me, they'll be like, "Oh, I don't know that Cloris. I don't really like her too much." But it's because of that, because there's a clash, right, between styles and values. So you
Right.
gotta figure out who matches, your values, your style, and your audience, and then reach out to those people and connect.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the Beyond Influencer marketing brand then. Uh, when you, what did it look like when you started? Did you start the book first and then the podcast, or did you start the podcast and then write the book? Or
I actually started the podcast first, but I knew I was already writing the book. I just said I want to have that platform before I launched the book this time. So I created the podcast, and I started to connect with even more influencers. At the time, I already had great connections. So something that I did for the book is to reach out to previous influencer connections I had from my other show and ask them if they would want to write like a short article for the book. Because I said, okay, this is all my experience, right? But if people read that alone, it's not like motivating enough. But if they hear from other people who are top influencers, then that kind of makes the message stronger. So I reached out to a small group of them because we had built that connection. They said yes. So if you go to the book, you'll see several stories kind of sprinkled throughout the book about their own experience and how they leverage connections with influencers to grow their business. So I collaborated with them on that. And then when I published the book, of course, they were all excited about it. They wanted to be part of it. They had an article published within the book. So I did all of that. And then at the same time, I started to think about um, what is it that this is leading people to? Because people listen to the podcast, they read the book, but what's missing? So I said, okay, let me create a program that people can go through so they implement what they have learned, the people who want to take it to the next level. So all that stuff happened before I published the book. I wanted to
okay,
have it all ready. Yeah.
nice. So let's talk a little bit about the foundations of that then. Why was it so important for you to help people leverage connections with influencers?
Well, it's because I felt like that's what really saved my business. I was going to quit. I really was. I was ready. Woke up. I said, okay, this is my decision. I'm quitting. And thank goodness I took some time to kind of unwind. And I went to this, we're not that far away from the coast. So I just drove about probably an hour and 20 minutes and went for a long walk on the beach. It was a cold day, very foggy. So foggy that I couldn't see probably more than 15 feet ahead of me. There was nobody. Uh, but I loved it. I love fog. So I was just walking and I had to look down because I couldn't see ahead of me. I was just looking at the sand. I
Mm.
kept walking and walking. I walked for like 4 hours, believe it or not. It's just 4 hours. And then at the end of the 4 hours, the sun had risen. So then all the fog dissipated. And yeah, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to quit. I'm going to figure out a way out of this. And I just kind of had that renewed energy. And that's when I started to see the opportunities, right? Like sometimes you don't see it, like it's right in front of you,
Yeah.
but because I had that more positive attitude, then I started to notice, these people, they post articles on other websites. I should do a guest post and I should just apply to be a guest on podcasts and like all these things. So like, oh, that's what I'm going to do now instead of like creating all this content like crazy. Just try to get myself out there. So that's what I did, and that's what changed everything. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you started it because you want to help others leverage connections with influencers because that was something that helped you save your business. Uh,
Yeah,
so
exactly. I think everybody should do it, regardless of the kind of business you're in or, where the stage that you're at. Uh, I see it as a must because yes, technology changes and tactics, but relationships is the one thing that stays the same for business success.
okay, and why is it so important to you to help others leverage connections with influencers if it's going to help raise their increase their business or save their business? Like, why is it so important for you to be helping those people with that?
I think it all goes back to the original message I had, which was to reveal your magnificence, right? I was empowered to help people have their gifts, right? And not just kind of put them aside and then look back when they're 90 years old and say, oh, I wish I had done this, right? But to really do it, to take their gifts out into the world and be successful. So that's what it is. And I still say that, like, oh, remember, you got to reveal your magnificence. That has stayed the same throughout, even with all these changes, because that's the mission behind it. Yes.
I like that. So your why is at a deep level been consistent through all this. It's just
Right.
you've found different ways to, fit what you're working on to suit that.
True. Yes.
Okay. And as far as today goes, you've been doing this for a while now, and you've built a business around it. Do you feel like you're still aligned with that why, or has it evolved at all?
I think it has stayed constant throughout this whole time. There are people who I reach who will, they might have felt in the past that they could never do it. Like maybe they're stuck in a job they hate, or they've gone through tough economic, financial situations. Like there was a lady who she was homeless for a while, but she had this gift and she had this desire to help others. And she said that what I've been sharing with her has helped her see that there's a chance, she could do it. I think once you see that chance, then you can actually work toward that and make it happen. But if you don't see it happening, you just won't do it. So yeah.
Okay. So when you were, first starting out your radio show or first starting your podcast, or writing your book, did you ever, question whether you wanted to be that vulnerable with the world, or did you have any self-made barriers that you had to overcome to, make it so that you can make the impact that you want to make?
Yeah, I think yes, I definitely, especially with the first book, because there was a lot of personal stuff in there. I mean, a lot, I would say. Like I revealed a lot about myself and how I was feeling, right? Like I had friends who reached out to me after they read the book. It's like, oh my God, I didn't know you went through all this stuff. I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't want you to feel bad about me. I just want you to look at the positive part. How I overcame that, and I became a better person because of it. So I was afraid, when I wrote that first book, when I published it. But at the same time, I think when something bad happens to you, you so want to help others to nothing like that happens to them, right? Like you scream, or don't do that. No, it's bad. You want to help people. It's just, I think it's human nature. So because I was so strong in me, I just did it. I just kind of faced the fear and did it.
Yeah.
And then even now, as I share, because people see us like, oh, it was easy for her to grow this business, but it wasn't. So I do a lot of like behind the scenes, and I share mistakes that I have made all the time, just because people see that and they can relate to you. Like, oh yeah, so I'm not the only one who's making mistakes, and learning from them. So I think sharing who you are definitely allows you to create a stronger relationship with your audience. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Um, have you seen, what have you seen as far as when you've interacted with other influencers? Have you noticed similar cases where, maybe they've had a barrier that they need to overcome, and because their mission sort of helps them overpower that they've pushed through it?
Yeah, definitely. I've seen, like, everybody went through some sort of challenge that made them want to help others. I really haven't met anyone who didn't go through a challenge before starting their business. It's amazing, because many people start businesses just because they uh, they have a problem, so they are like their kind of like their guinea pig. They try the solution works, and then they want to share it with the world, or they have seen a problem in their family that affects them, and they want to help others. So I think all of the influencers I've connected with have had that problem, and the problem might be a really bad car accident, like Brendan Bouchard always talks about. He has that near death experience, but it doesn't have to be that big. It could be, I know somebody who he just hated his job, and that was a bad thing for him. He didn't want to wake up in the morning and go to work, so he created a business, and now he wants to teach people how to do that. Yes.
Hmm. So what's some of the biggest advice that you give to people in regards to, leveraging connections with influencers?
Well, what I would say, that the first thing we talked about sharing like who you are, right? Like the true you. That is so important to connect with influencers, and will allow you to approach the conversation in a much more natural way. A lot of people are afraid to approach influencers because they don't want to be rejected, or they feel like they're gonna waste time, or they're not at that level, right? Like, oh, I want to have X number of subscribers or this much revenue before I do that. So they create these excuses that don't allow them to move forward. But I think if you are yourself and you actually share that with the influencer through something as simple as telling them how they have changed your life, that opens a relationship. Like that's how I first connected with Dr. Wayne Dyer. As I said, I had been reading all his books, and I just wanted to say thank you. So I wrote a letter, hand wrote it, sent it to Hay House Publishers, not really expecting to for him to read it. I'm like, yeah, he's got millions of readers. He'll never
Right.
read it, but whatever. So I sent it, and 2 weeks later, I had a reply from him from Hawaii saying, I loved your letter. Thank you. Yes, I would love to meet you in person. He was going to be in New York City at a conference. And I went there and met them, and that's how everything started. So, something as simple as sharing who you are, how their message has impacted you, can make all the difference. So just go into it with that mindset, and also go into it with a mindset that you have tons of value to offer. So offer value, um, realize your value, and then you'll be able to start the connection. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. Um, Actually, going off of that, like before I even started my podcast, I had done an interview with a YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers, and it's like, I don't even have a podcast launched yet. It's not a real thing, and I was able to get this guy on the show. Is pretty, amazing to think about it like that, and a lot of times it is just getting the courage to ask the question and see what they say.
Exactly. Yes. Love that.
Awesome. So, what are you most excited about as far as the future of your brand, the Beyond Influencer marketing? Like, what are you looking most forward to moving forward?
Well, I'm looking forward to really creating that culture of a collaboration, and for people to create long-term connections. The latest thing I've done, because in the online world, you do a lot of things that scale, right? So you do a lot of email campaigns, you do webinars, you do summit that I just ran, things like that to a large scale. But we sometimes forget about things that don't scale, that really allow you to create a bigger impact many times in each person, not a lot of people. So that's what I've been doing lately. I've been hosting a series of small gatherings where I actually meet my subscribers, and to know what they're all about. They get to know each other, and then I invite them to join a new mastermind that I have with a small group, where a small group of people work together, collaborate, help each other, and then introduce people to others in their network. Because everybody you meet has great connections, right? Even if it's just one, they know somebody you want to meet. So if you start that, if you go into any relationship with that mindset, you'll be able to grow your network. It's in amazing ways. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. So what does that look like? Like, how did you, um, you know, get your community together? Like, what did you do to pull that off?
Well, I just basically said that. I'm sending out emails to you guys. I have no clue who is reading my emails. I don't know. I want to get to know you, and I want you to get to know each other. So you find opportunities to collaborate. So let's get together, and I limit the size of the meetings, of course, and you're gonna have a chance to introduce yourself, so we can get to know each other. And the feedback has been great. I've hosted already 4 of those meetings, and people are just kind of wanting to help each other right off the bat. Like a lady's like, "Yeah, I have 2 podcasts. I'd like to have you on my show," and people just helping each other. Again, it's human nature, but you just gotta get people together. Yeah.
Nice. What kind of I guess technology is behind that? Like, how do you do your meetings? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we use Zoom. So just a Zoom call. That's it. Yeah,
Okay.
very simple.
I like that because I mean, especially with podcasting, you can see like how many people are downloading an episode, but you don't
Right.
really have
Yeah.
comments on the episode. You don't really hear from people unless
Yeah.
they're intentionally reaching out to you. So you really don't
Exactly.
know who's on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I did it.
I like that. As far as someone who's looking to start out, like maybe uh, they've got a message that they want to get out there, but they haven't started sharing yet. What would be some of the biggest advice you would give to this person for starting out?
Well, I would say first make sure that you know exactly who you want to help. Like everything comes from the knowledge of that person, right? That you have heard about it, the avatar profile or your ideal client, your niche audience, whatever. A deep knowledge of that audience, which should be just like that one person you want to help, to really visualize that person and their problems. That's where everything comes from. So don't make the mistake of wanting to help everyone or just seeing your ideal avatar as this like group of people. Just give that person a name, and everything you create should be for that person. Get to know their problems, solve one problem to start with. Focus on that. Focus is the most important word here. And once you do that, once you solve that one problem for that one person, then you can expand. Yeah.
I like that a lot. Yeah, just finding the one person that you want to help. And I find that a lot of people I talk to, oftentimes it can be sort of like a mirror of themselves. Like they're trying to help who they were in the past
Yeah.
and that's a good way to approach it too. If you don't have anybody in mind.
Exactly. Yes.
Awesome. That's great advice. So let's say you meet someone who already, knows that they're more established. Maybe they've been influencing for a few years. What do you think is either some of your secret sauce or some of the secret sauce that you've seen other people use that can help them level up and reach more of audience?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, right now the trend is not so much on like reaching more people, but reaching people at a deeper level.
Okay.
Like for example, recently, John Lee Dumas, Jill, and Josh Stanton of Screw the 9 to 5, and John from Entrepreneurs on Fire, they created this 5 day challenge, right? So they really went all out. It was a paid challenge, so you had to be fairly committed, to participate. And they went just really above and beyond. And this is all to launch an affiliate offer that they're supporting. It's a program created by Russell Brunson and Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi. So how do they stand out among the thousands of people who are promoting this course by creating this challenge? So the engagement and the challenge was just amazing. They had thousands of people live, and the comments and people really sharing who they are and what they want to do with such eagerness. I think that's what you want right now. You want to come up with a way to interact with people, to have a deeper connection with them, rather than going for like the high quantities and the masses. And yes, you could go for the masses and create influence that way, but try to find a way to create that connection too. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's great advice. So do you have any other advice then for creating a deeper connection with your audience?
What I would say, don't be afraid to do things that don't scale. And that includes just having conversations with people who are ideal clients, with current clients too, and to see exactly, I think it's interesting to do like an evaluation. Like, what is it that you find most valuable about my message? What do you find most valuable about my style? See what people resonate with. Many times you're surprised when you ask this question. So really get to know people better who are in your audience. You could do surveys too, yes. Especially if you have a large audience, you can have a lot of great insights from asking the right questions. So definitely survey your audience often. Do live things, Facebook lives and YouTube lives and whatever you can do to really interact with people, and invite people to give their feedback. Because if you don't, then not really very rare the person who does it. But if you say, please, I want your feedback, go here, leave me a voicemail. There's so much great technology right now for podcasters. Other people can leave you a voicemail with a question or with something that they liked about the show. You mentioned their name. They love to be on your show and to be mentioned. Things like that. Just try to come up with creative ways to incorporate your audience into what you do. You could do Q&A shows, just so many creative ways. Just think about it and just do one thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's huge advice. And for you, what you've been doing is this, getting to know your audience calls, and then also the mastermind group, got diving even deeper with some people. That's the strategy that you found is the direction that you want to go with what you're doing.
Definitely, yes, yeah. It's great. You definitely have to try doing that, just to have that deeper connection with your audience, even if it's just one small thing you do today. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, before I open the floor for you to talk more about your podcast and your book and your brands, um, knowing our audience and that we're trying to help inspire other people to share and overcome the barriers that come with it. Do you have any last words that you could share with our listeners here?
Well, what I would say is that no matter where you're at, what stage of your business is in, you will encounter challenges. That's just the way it is. It will happen. So the question is, what do you do with that, right? So I would say if it's a big challenge and you really feel like you're in that negative place, I would not make any big decisions at that time. It's okay to take a little bit of time off, even if it's just a few hours or the whole day, to really kind of get back into that positive mode, something like what I did. Because if you make decisions out of frustration or fear, that's when things start to get worse. So I would say if you face a challenge, just say to yourself, it's okay, it's normal, it's going to happen, it was meant to happen, it's fine. Let me take some time off, let me just think about this, let me just meditate for a few minutes, whatever it is, but never make decisions when you are in that negative state. And then once you feel better, then ask yourself, what did I learn from this? How can I make it so this doesn't happen again? And write it down. Have a journal or something where you write the lessons learned. Share your lessons learned with your audience. That's something I've done. I had a webinar that didn't do so well. I did a behind the scenes. Why it didn't work. Things like that. Just share that with your audience, so you're helping people, but at the same time you're documenting stuff, so you will never make those mistakes again.
Right. That's huge advice. Thanks so much for sharing that. So I'd like to just open the floor for you to talk about your podcast, your book, anything else you'd like to shout out, and then I'll make sure to put in the show notes of the episode on my website links to all of those for you. But I'd like to hear what you'd like to share.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. So, yeah, the book is Beyond Influencer Marketing. And yes, it's about building long term connections with influencers to grow your business. So, I go over, the step by step process on how to do that, so they become long term connections. And then check out the podcast. It's called Beyond Influencer Marketing as well. All of that is on my website at cloriskylie.com. If you want to grab or learn more about the book, go to beyondinfluencermarketing.com. And if you want to get my guide with 15 ways to get noticed by influencers, you can go to cloriskylie.com/influencer. And that is, you can download it and get started, because the key is to take that first step. And then, things become easier as you get better at this. So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, I like what you're doing. I think that it's important. It seems like it's, you're like perfectly suited to be the person for the job, to be, sharing that and helping others with it. And I love how you're incorporating people into a community where you can help each other grow and, introduce to each other. And it's just sort of a whole ecosystem that you're putting together. I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy.
Sure. Well, I appreciate you coming on today and being vulnerable with us and sharing your why and sharing so many tips with us. Before I let you go, do you mind if do you have any feedback for me here on the podcast? Like, how was your experience here? Do you have any constructive criticism, anything as far as feedback goes?
Well, I think it's awesome the fact that you focus so much on the why, because that's what keeps people in business. That's what makes them influencers, because they have a strong why. Otherwise, they will not survive. That's just the way it is. Even if you manage to maybe buy a bunch of followers or be in the news, or you have your 15 minutes of fame, you will fade if you don't have a strong why. So I think that's why the show and your mission is so great. You really have to understand that without a strong why, you cannot succeed.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and thanks for taking the time today to come on here today.
Well, thank you.